Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Vish and today we're gonna go through the best books I've read in 2021. So I will say it's very hard to make it to my best list, and I think I've read some pretty good stuff in 2021, so I've picked 10 books to talk about today, and each one can be 2 books from a series or more than 2 books from a series that I just can't pick, so they're just going to go as one. And the books are not ranked at all other than the top 2 of the list. And because I have talked about these books ad nauseum, I'm gonna keep it brief and tell you keywords that I loved about these books. Maybe you'll like them, maybe you won't like them, that's fine. But I'm gonna keep it short, simple, and let you know what books made it to my favorites list of the year and also of all time. So I'm gonna talk about 8 books first and then get to my top 2 at the end. So the first book I want to talk about is Wings of Shadow by Nikki Palpretto. This is the 3rd book in the Crown of Feathers trilogy, and the Crown of Feathers trilogy was actually part of the channel buddy read that I do every month, and this was such a solid YA fantasy. I did not expect this trilogy to be that good, and I would also categorize the whole trilogy as my most surprising books that I've read, because I didn't expect, like I said, this to be this good. This trilogy is about Phoenix Riders and wars between 2 different political factions. Obviously with the Phoenixes, there's animal companions in this that actually have a personality and is very detrimental to the plot, obviously. So they play a big part in the story, and I just love the interactions between the riders and the Phoenixes. Some of them are sassy, some of them are fiercely loyal, and I loved them so much. We also have multiple POVs in this, and I really like the POVs, and each POV is from different people in the factions. So you get different opinions about the war and also their mentalities as well, so it's not just the same thing over and over again. And what's really interesting with this trilogy is that the world history and the world building is not done typically, I would say, because there is letters and excerpts from history books that give you the world building and the world history information instead of info dumping it on you. And I think it was done very well. And I think the world history and the world building is very much on the adult level. So if you're wanting to kind of step up from YA to adult, I think this would be a good taste as to how the world building and world history might work in an adult fantasy. But overall, I would really just highly recommend anyone who just loves fast-paced, character-driven, obviously with the animal companion, multiple POVs, all of that sounds good to you. I highly recommend this trilogy. I absolutely loved it. I will definitely be rereading this. The 3rd one has a solid conclusion to the story, and I was very satisfied with the ending. Except for a little thing, but it's like a very little thing that didn't really bother me. But yeah, overall, really enjoyed this book and the entire trilogy as well. This is my favorite out of the trilogy, by the way. Next book I want to talk about, I actually don't have it physically because my mom has borrowed it. Actually, a few of these books my mom has borrowed, so please excuse the lack of book in my hand. So the next book I want to talk about is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is a YA sci-fi series, and I have only read the 1st book in this series, and I've read half of Starsight, but I put it down because I wasn't feeling sci-fi at the moment. And I really enjoyed Skyward. I did not expect to enjoy as much as I did, and I enjoyed this with my emotions. I know that's a really weird way to put it, but with Brandon Sanderson books, I feel very subjective of them. I really loved them because they were well constructed and well told. But with this one, I loved it with all of my heart because it was just very emotional instead of very subjective. Because it was a very emotional storytelling instead of the rigid factual storytelling, if you get what I mean. Because with this, he didn't really write down facts about the world. He did build the world very nicely, but it's not structured, which is very refreshing because, you know, his other books, it's like that. There's also another animal companion in this and a sentient object that talks and communicates, which I also really love. A few of my favorites actually have talking sentient objects, like Foundry Side by Robin Jackson Bennett. And with this, it's only Spencer, our main character's POV. There's no multiple POVs, but we do have a found family trope, and the camaraderie between them during battle scenes or training scenes are so well done. I love Spencer's interaction with all of these characters and how she learned from them and grew, and all of them also learning from her and them accepting her into their group and trusting her instincts. I just absolutely loved this book. There was also a mystery element to this, which was paced very well, and the reveal at the end was definitely a very good payoff as well, with obviously more to learn about the world and everything in the second book, which I have learned a little bit. And I'll say that I don't enjoy Starsight as much as I did with Skyward, because Spencer is not with those people that were with her in Skyward, so I don't know how I'm gonna feel with that. But I really loved Skyward, and I feel like this was the first sci-fi that I could picture everything in my head, and I actually do have difficulty picturing things in my head when it comes to sci-fi because I'm not familiar with like the spaceship and the terms and stuff like that, which is fine, but it's frustrating to me because I picture everything in my head when I'm reading, so that's like a whole other issue. Anyway, let's talk about the next book. So the next book is A Worthy Opponent by Katie Robert. This is the third book in the Wicked Villain series. This is an adult romance novel that I absolutely devoured. So with this being the third book, you can actually read the books out of order because they follow different characters, and with this book we follow Tink and Hook, and this is a pure grump romance, which I was living for. There's a lot of BDSM with this. It's also an enemies to lovers story, like true enemies to lovers story, which, oh my god, it was amazing. And Tink is actually a plus size main character, and I think Katie Robert did very well with that, and also the descriptions of Tink and everything, because I feel like with other plus size books it's a hit or miss for me, and I feel like that's just personal preference, to be honest, on how I like to read about my plus size main characters. But Katie Robert for me did very well with that. And I actually haven't continued with the series just yet because I feel like this was my favorite, and I don't really know if I want to continue on with the series, but I will, obviously, because I really like Katie Roberts' smut and her writing, so I will. But for now, this is my favorite out of the series. So the next books I want to talk about is actually a whole series that is up to date. It's not like a completed series or anything. But in 2021, I started and it's up to date with the Nevermore series. Oh my god, I love this series so freaking much. I buddy read this with Leanna, and I know Leanna, every time I tag you in one of my videos it's to do with the Nevermore series because we buddy read it and I talk about it a lot, and I'm sorry. So the Nevermore series is a middle grade fantasy series that really gives you the Harry Potter feeling that you're looking for other than Harry Potter. This is it. I gave this all 5 stars. I can't pick a favorite because they're all so different from each other in terms of plot, but I love the character developments from book 1 to book 3. I love the villain in this. He is so complex, and that's very surprising for a middle grade fantasy because you just expect them to be evil and nothing else, but there's more to him than meets the eye, and I cannot wait to find out more about our villain. And some of the characters in this are very reminiscent of some Harry Potter characters, especially Morgan's best friend reminds me so much of Ron, and Ron is one of my favorite characters. He is hilarious, and so is Morgan's best friend in here as well. I know the 4th book is coming out in October 2022, and I cannot wait for the next book. I have a suspicion that I will be rereading this. We shall see. But yeah, I highly recommend this middle grade series if you haven't, but everyone that I know has read it. So if you haven't, I highly recommend this. The next book is Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. This is the 2nd book to the Strange the Dreamer duology. I read Strange the Dreamer like in the beginning of 2020 or the end of 2019, I'm not sure. I read it a long time ago, and I liked Strange the Dreamer. I loved Laini Taylor's writing. That was the main thing about that book. But when I picked up Muse of Nightmares, it was a whole different game. At least for me. This had a more darker tone because of the dark topics that she talks about in here. So there's a lot of grief, anger, and vengeance in this, and we see different types of them throughout the book, and I love that discussion that Laini Taylor has in this, and her writing obviously is so beautiful, and it just paints a beautiful dark picture. I am going to be reading the Daughter Smoke and Bone trilogy very soon, and I'm very excited to jump back into Laini Taylor's writing. I will definitely be revisiting the Strange the Dreamer duology and rereading them many times, especially Muse of Nightmare. There is a character in here that is very much hated in Strange the Dreamer, and a lot of people have told me that you will not look at that character the same in here. And for me, I can see why they say it, but I still despise the character. But I understand the character more in this book because of all the, like I said, with the topics of grief, anger, and vengeance and frustration. And I highly recommend this duology, especially Muse of Nightmares, for sure. Next up is another Katie Robert book, and that is Neon Gods by Katie Robert. This is the first book in the Dark Olympus series, I believe. I'm not too sure. But this is a Hades and Persephone retelling. This was my favorite Hades and Persephone retelling. Something else took the #1 spot, which we will talk about later. I'm sure you all know, because I won't shut up about any of these books. So again, Hades and Persephone retelling. Very, very smutty. I loved the chemistry between these two, which is why I loved this book. The chemistry between the two main characters is very, very important for me. If they don't have any chemistry and if I don't care about both of them, it's not happening for me. So their chemistry was just amazing. I read A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett Sinclair last year, and I feel like this is much better than that one because the Persephone in A Touch of Darkness was very whiny and she made a lot of stupid decisions, whereas this Persephone, she can take care of herself, which I prefer much, much more. And the second book for this Dark Olympus series is Electric Idol, which I actually do have and I really want to read it, and it follows Persephone's sister Psyche. So I'm excited to read that one as well. Alright, so the next book my mom borrowed as well because I really loved it, and that is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Unpopular opinion, but this is my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid book so far that I've read. I've only read this, Seven Husbands, and Daisy Jones and the Six, which is wild because everyone prefers Daisy Jones and the Six. And a lot of people hated this book or just did not like it. But I loved it, and for one reason, and that is the sibling relationship in this story. I love sibling relationships in a story. Some of my favorites are the Green Bone Saga, this, the Crown of Feathers trilogy, the Poison Studies series, and even though they're not really siblings, but the relationship between Risa and Cassian and Azrael in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. So basically I love sibling relationships, and this story really hit home for me in terms of what these siblings had to go through together. I just really, really loved how they stuck together and protected each other when their life was just a dumpster fire, and it really hit home for me. And this book was so well written as well in terms of pace. We jump from different POVs. I know a lot of people don't like the POVs at the end of the book because you jump to different POVs that are strangers that are looking at the story from the outside, and they're just random people in the party. It has a party at the end. And I liked it because again, you have an outside perspective of the siblings and also the inside perspectives of their relationship, because they're all famous in some way. And sometimes with being famous or being well known, you always have the outsiders perceiving who you are and what you're doing, and also the inside perspective on who you actually are and what you're actually doing. And I like that difference. I don't know if she's writing any more books to come out this year. I'm not sure, but I really hope she writes more of this as well because like I said, I absolutely loved it. Next book I want to talk about is Helm of Midnight by Marina Lostetter. This was an arc from NetGalley that I got in end of 2020, and it was coming out in April, and I was like, you know what, the cover looks great and the synopsis was amazing, and I gave it a try, and oh my god, it was better than I ever expected. This was marketed as Silence of the Lambs meet Mistborn, and I will say the Silence of the Lambs part is spot on, but the Mistborn part, I can see why they said Mistborn, but it's not really Mistborn. Maybe the complexity of the magic system is like Mistborn, but that's pretty much it. This is an adult fantasy horror book, and I really want to read more fantasy horror because I feel like that is the sweet spot, as well as fantasy romance is my sweet spot. I need to read more of these, and I do have a few books on my list, but if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. I know Brahm is one that I really want to explore, but other than that, please let me know in the comments. Anyway, this has a serial killer plot, and we have multiple POVs yet again, because I love my multiple POVs, and they're very different POVs. We follow a, I guess, police officer soldier that's trying to solve a crime. We're following a girl that is trying to save her mother from death, and then we also have the POV of the serial killer, which is my favorite POV. They're all very different POVs, but they come together in the end, and that was very, very well done, because I didn't know how they were gonna, you know, connect in the end, but oh my god, it was very well done. It was such a great blend of fantasy and horror, or fantasy and thriller, and the magic in this is very fascinating. Long story short, an essence of a person, or the essence of their talent, can be imbued in these masks, and depending on the danger of the person or the talent is how the police officers determine who can use the masks. So for example, with the serial killer, his essence was imbued in the mask, and no one can use the mask because obviously they'll start killing people. Whereas you have a mask where if you put it on, you can like make someone tell the truth by interrogating them. It's like an interrogation mask, so you get the talent of interrogation. And for that kind of mask, only police officers could use. They have like a level and stuff. It's very, very interesting and very complex, which I really, really enjoyed. And I know the second book will be coming out hopefully in 2023. Please, I really want the next book, because not everything is wrapped up in this, and again, which is why we need the second book to find out more about the mystery element in this. All right, now we're up to my top 2. So number 2 on the list is Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe. This is my number 1 Hades and Persephone retelling. It is a graphic novel series, and it's very surprising to me how much I'm attached to these characters. Not just Hades and Persephone, just all the characters that are in here, like Hera, Eros, Artemis, Demeter, Aphrodite, Ares. There's just so many characters in here that I absolutely adore, and this is definitely in my favorites of all time. I cannot wait for the second volume to match with my first volume. I've read all 180 whatever episodes on Webtoon. She's actually taking a 4-month break from releasing any more episodes, because I think we're at the season finale at this point, and I'm very sad that I have to wait 4 months for the next season to start. But you know what? I can reread this and just cry about it. So like I said, it's not just following Hades and Persephone's story. It is following other characters in this as well, in their story and how they intertwine with Hades and Persephone. The art style in this is absolutely gorgeous. I keep trying to find webtoon comics and graphic novels with sort of similar art style, because I don't know if anyone can replicate this type of art style. It is absolutely gorgeous. And if you haven't read this, I highly, highly recommend it. I haven't seen anyone that I recommend this to hate this or not like it or just thought it was okay. Everyone I know has loved it very, very much. There is a trigger warning for sexual abuse for this, so be aware of that going into this. Like I said, it's not just candies and roses. There's also very, very dark topics in this as well. And yeah, please, please pick this up if you can. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the number 1 spot. And I'm gonna be a poo-poo head and say it's gonna be 2 books for the number 1 spot, because I couldn't pick, but they are part of the same series, and if you know me, you probably know what it's gonna be. So it is Kingdom of Copper and Empire of Gold, the second and third book in the David Bode trilogy. Also read this for the channel Buddy Read. I'm telling you, we read some hitters last year, and I just hope we continue the streak this year. The David Bode trilogy is now one of my favorite series of all time. These 2 are my favorite books of all time as well. The first book, not so much, but these 2 I absolutely love. I think I'm leaning right now, because it changes every day. Right now I'm loving Kingdom of Copper more than Empire of Gold, but really these 2 are equal in my head. I absolutely love these 2. If you don't know, the David Bode trilogy is a adult Southeast Asian fantasy series, and because of this trilogy, I definitely want to dive into more and more Southeast Asian fantasy, or just Asian inspired fantasy, just anything that's non-Western, because I feel like I am going to love every one of them. The series is just full of magic and politics and war and characters that you're absolutely gonna root and die for. These 2 pack a punch because the war that I just mentioned is very, very prominent in these. I'm gonna stop holding them because they're heavy. But the war is very, very prominent in these two books because you have several different factions in the Daevabad city, and each faction has their own political maneuverings, and also they hold different grudges, and they want their faction to rule Daevabad. So they're all kind of fighting for the throne, but it's way more than just fighting for the throne. It's about oppression, it's about murder and vengeance. It's very, very conflicting, and I know some people, I don't mean to throw shade, but Jashana, she found the conflict very, very frustrating, and I think that hindered her enjoyment a little bit. Please don't quote me on this, Shoshana. I'm sorry if I'm wrong. But from what I remember with her rantings about specifically Dara, because she's also a Dara hater. I don't hate Dara, but I don't like him. It's a very, very love-hate relationship with Dara for me. But anyway, I think her frustration with the conflict really hindered her experience. But for me, that conflict just gave me more fire, and the feeling of frustration made me love this series even more. It could vary from, you know, people to people, but for me it worked very, very well, and I absolutely love this trilogy. If you haven't read it, I highly, highly recommend this trilogy. It's a lot of politics, so beware of that. If you're not into fantasy politics, maybe don't, but at least give it a try. Audiobooks are phenomenal. It feels so atmospheric. I mean, it is atmospheric, but the narrator does such a good job in making it feel like a folklore, and she's telling the story. It is absolutely amazing. So definitely check out the audiobook, and please read the Daevabad trilogy. Okay, so those are the best books and my favorites of 2021. Let me know what are your favorites of 2021, if we have any similarities, if you dislike. Also let me know if you disliked any of my favorites. It's okay, I can take it. Just let me know in the comments below. I won't be angry a lot. Okay, if you made it to the end of the video, and since this is a favorites video, let's go with the heart eye emoji for this. So it's gonna be the opposite emoji for the worst books, which if you haven't checked out, I will link it. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't. All my socials are linked down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!